year, I've already had my diet of Lindy's and Athlons and Texas football. Got that mailed to me last weekend. Always enjoy getting Texas football. It's the Bible in Texas, but the Bible of college football nationally, no question about it. Best there is, most information. The man, no myth. He's the man, and he is the legend, and his magazine reigns above all. And that's Phil Steele's 2021 college football preview, and he joins us right now. And let me real quickly, Phil, say hello to you. Good afternoon, and compliment Chris Van Dyne from your staff. I think my magazines will probably be waiting for me at home today. But Chris said, "Hey, let me send you some pages. I got the pages I needed for this interview." Chris is he's the best. He's right. He is deserving of working in the Phil Steele organization.
Well, I appreciate that, Robert. And, I'll tell you a little something about Chris. He's the one that lines up all my coaches' interviews for me. And this year, I talked to, I believe, a little over 110 of the 130 head coaches. And each of the calls takes about an hour each to go over the team with them. And each year, he gets me a few more. I remember, I think it was like 5 years ago, we were about 80, 85 of the coaches. Last year, we finally got over 100 something. And this year over 110. So Chris is doing a heck of a job. And how the heck are you doing, Robert? Long time no hear, buddy.
Yeah, I'm doing good, and I'm still working on MG down the street. But he would tell you that the guy you've been talking to probably knows just about as much as anybody over there. Hey, I wanted to say this because one of the guys we talked about when you called me about Oklahoma State, and I'm really proud of this. I told you that left tackle, the junior college transfer from Butler County out of New Orleans, out of Warren Eaton High School, Caleb Etienne was probably going to be the guy. He showed up, and this was about 3, 4 weeks ago. I was there at a camp on a Sunday, and I walk in and I see this kid, and I walk straight over to Rob Glass, the strength and conditioning coach, and I said, "Please tell me that's Caleb Etienne." He goes, "Oh, yeah, that's Caleb." And I said, "What did he come in at?" And he said, "We weighed him and everything yesterday. He's 6'8" and a quarter, 360 pounds." And Rob said, "But it's not fat. There's hardly any body fat on this kid. He's the leanest 360-pound kid I've ever seen." And he was standing next to a former OSU starter, Zach Crabtree, Phil, and he made Crabtree look like a shrimp. And this is a guy that's a year or two removed from being with the LA Chargers. And I'm like, wow. So Etienne is definitely the guy that I kind of insinuated to you he might be. We haven't seen too many kids on the offensive line that physically look like that kid.
Well, and I got to tell you, for your listeners there, Robert, if they haven't heard me talk about you before, I always get my Oklahoma State information directly from Robert Allen, and it's a tremendous source. For years, people have said, "Hey, how'd you get the Oklahoma State quarterback right? That's pretty surprising this year." And I got to point my finger right there at Robert Allen. He's the best. He gives me all the great Oklahoma State information, and I pride my magazine on having the most amount of correct returning or quarterback starters and people in the right spot. And Robert's always the one that gets my Oklahoma State information for me.
Well, and again, it'll be Spencer Sanders, but boy, he's got Shane Illingworth on his heels. Hey, let's get into the fans want to hear from you. They don't want to hear anything from me. I kind of just read them your picks in the Big 12, and here's my question: how good do you think the Big 12 is?
I think the top 9 in the Big 12 are really good. It's Kansas is going to go through a rebuilding year this year. Let's face it. I mean, Lance Leipold comes in after spring practice, basically, brings in new coordinators, both sides of the football. Granted, he kept their interim head coach. He's back with them, and that's going to help. But you're talking about brand new systems, new folks coming in. Kansas is going to take some time. But everybody else in the Big 12, dangerous. I mean, you're looking at a Baylor team that I've got slated down there in a three-way tie for 7th. And it's a Baylor team that 2 years ago was 11-3, a number ranked highly in the country. Last year was a first year for Dave Aranda. When I talked to Coach Aranda, went over to tea with him, he said he felt like a stepdad last year, and now this year he feels like the dad. So he knows the players. He's not just getting adjusted to them, and I think Baylor's going to be a much improved team. K-State loaded with Chris Kleiman. They've got 16 returning starters coming back. Remember, they lost their quarterback last year, Skylar Thompson, early in the year, and Will Howard went through some growing pains. Thompson's back. Thompson's a legitimate NFL caliber quarterback. They've got Deuce Vaughn at running back, Knowles at receiver, and the defense is going to be solid. You look at Texas Tech. We've been waiting for, it's the third year for Coach Wells. Generally, coaches hit their stride in year three. He's got Tyler Shuck coming in there from Oregon as the quarterback. They've got a loaded receiving core. The defense is going to be the best he's had in his 3 years. West Virginia was a team that made a move. So I think the top 9 in the Big 12, sorry about that, Kansas, are all legitimate bowl caliber teams. So I love the depth that's in the Big 12 this year.
You know what? And folks, I've been saying that. I did not, I didn't rehearse this with Phil Steele. That's kind of the way I feel. I think that if you don't go week after week, even if you're Oklahoma, and they're the most talented team, and obviously Lincoln Riley's got a great winning culture built in there, and Norman, but if you don't go every week with your eyes wide open and ready to play, you can get beat in this league. This is going to be, it may not be a great year to produce, and if OU does go through, kind of like you're thinking they will be a really tough playoff team, but this is a year you better be ready. You mentioned West Virginia and Neil Brown. I'm a big Neil Brown fan. I think he's a really good coach, and he's got Letty Brown back. He's got a veteran quarterback that needs to improve, and then they should still be pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. And when you have a great runner and a good defense, that's a really good recipe. And there's a lot of teams that kind of have that. I mean, Iowa State's got it. I think Oklahoma State's got it. And obviously OU, they bring Kennedy Brooks back. And how about the flow of kids they've had from Tennessee, Phil?
Oh, yeah. It's pretty remarkable to get some of those guys in, like Eric Gray coming in there. And there seem to be at all the right spots as the guys that he brought in. But the thing about Oklahoma, I think the difference between Oklahoma this year and any of the other years for Lincoln Riley is going to be that defensive side of the football. I mean, they showed improvement last year. They still weren't anywhere near dominant, but they were much improved. I see another step forward this year with 8 starters back. Their defense is going to be very good. They've got my number 3 D-line in the country, number 9 set of linebackers, number 3 DBs. Spencer Rattler, anytime Lincoln Riley's had a veteran quarterback, they've done extremely well, and they've got the running backs with Brooks and Gray, the receiving core. This is a loaded Oklahoma team. Remember last year they were inexperienced on the offensive line. Now they've got experience on the O-line. So this is a dangerous team. And then we haven't even talked about the job Matt Campbell's doing at Iowa State. Just a simply phenomenal job there, and he's got all the big names back. You talk about the big name team. Brock Purdy's back at quarterback, Brees Hall at running back. The tight ends is the best tight end room in the country with Charlie Kolar, Chase Allen there. And the offensive line last year, inexperienced offensive line. This year they're all back. The defense has got an outstanding linebacking core. I rated the second best linebacking core in the country with Mike Rose, Ryan Vance, Jake Hummel. So this is a loaded Iowa State team that beat Oklahoma in the regular season last year. So I agree with you 100%. This is a league that every single week is going to be a tough game, with the exception of Kansas.
And we may have talked about this a little bit when we had our phone hookup, but one of the things I'm anxious to see, Matt Campbell did a diversion. They didn't really do anything physical in spring football. He treated it more like NFL OTAs. They didn't have a spring game. They even had separate practices at times for the veteran players and then what they called developmental practices for the younger players. Here in Stillwater, I watched Mike Gundy, and because he had 115 kids and had 3, offensive and defensive complete units, the last 2 weeks of practice, including the spring game, they did about 1,200 11v11 scrimmage plays, everything but tackling to the ground. I mean, everything else was live. And so you had some really young players getting about 400 snaps of 11. And I know it's not games, but it's still scrimmage type material and very so that's two opposite ways of doing things. And I know Matt thinks he'll have more gas in the tank at the end of the year. That's when they play OU, by the way. But I'm kind of anxious to see two coaches, veteran coaches, doing things differently. Which system works the best for which team?
Yeah, and coming off of last year, Robert, I think it would be Coach Gundy's system this year because I'll go back to my conversation I had with Coach Niumatalolo of Navy, and basically he said the one thing they've always prided themselves is being a very physical football team, and he felt that both them and Temple, which is another very physical football team, were greatly affected by the COVID last year. The lack of practices, the lack of contact. In fact, Temple couldn't even practice in the months of like August, September. So that really affected both of their two teams last year, and he felt, they were much more physical this spring and were going to be much more physical during the football season, and felt very optimistic they could get back to their bowl type of games. Other than the 3-9 season from last year or whatever they were, it was a very poor record for Navy last year. So the sentiment that I got from a lot of the coaches was they were glad that they could be a little bit more physical this year, and they thought that would help, especially defensively.
A couple more things with Phil Steele, publisher of the 2021 Phil Steele College Football Preview, which you can order now. Get online at philsteele.com and get that ordered and get it sent to you. And again, it's I heard you on with the guys from Sirius XM on Big 12. I'm on with those guys a lot. Dave Archer said, "Hey, this is the magazine I use to prepare for games, and I know this." On the Cowboy Radio Network, Dave Hunziker, John Holcomb, Robert Allen, we all have our copies of Phil Steele, and even if you have media guides, there are things you find in Phil Steele's magazine, believe it or not, that you don't find sometimes in the media guides. So it is a must-have for the people that are pros. So it surely should be the must-have for people who are fans. You really like TCU and Gary Patterson's team bouncing back.
Yeah, I do. And, once again, you go back to the fact that they've got 10 returning starters on offense. You look at the running back room that they have there. Last year they brought in Zach Evans, and Zach Evans was the number one running back out of high school last season, but didn't really see the field a lot early, and then sort of got his feet wet later in the year. Ended up getting 415 yards rushing and 7.7 yards per carry. This could be the year now. He's got the full off season with the team. They've got DeMarcado. They've got Miller. I really like their backfield that they have. And, in fact, Gary Patterson's been there for quite some time, and he's had some pretty good running backs. I remember some guy, LaDainian Tomlinson, played for him, and he said this could be the best running back room he's ever had. And so that's pretty much made me stand up. And then Max Dugan is back at QB. I remember he couldn't play in the opening game last season. Or did play in the second half when they had the comeback against Iowa State, but he wasn't ready to play. He had missed too much time due to some things that had happened in the off season, and I'm talking about COVID and things like that. Now he's back 100% ready to go, and the defense looks pretty good, as always, under Gary Patterson. If they get Texas at home, they've had a really good track record. In fact, TCU is 7-2 straight up against Texas in the 9 meetings. They do play Oklahoma on the road. That's a game where you expect them to lose anyway. I think the key for them is going to be that Oklahoma State game on the road and then the Iowa State game on the road. But I think they're a contender in the Big 12, as always. I did go with chalk. I went with Oklahoma. But Texas, TCU, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, those are clearly the all contenders in the Big 12 this year.
All right, we'll finish it up with this, and by the way, I'm perusing the all conference, first, second, third, fourth. I think you may have been the only one that made Malcolm Rodriguez a first team linebacker, and bless your heart for that, because that kid, he is as good a football player as I've seen here in a long, long time. And I think Mike Gundy would tell you the same thing. The only the bone I would pick is you had Matt Hembrow as the second team long snapper. And I think I told you this. He is the best long snapper I have ever seen, and that's something my kid did And I'm just telling you, I think you'll see Matt Hembrow snapping in the NFL for about 10, 15 years. But I don't know the kid that you had first team from OU, but Matt Hembrow's automatic. Your thoughts, and what do you think has to happen for Oklahoma State to have a really exceptional year after you kind of look at what Mike Gundy's got on paper heading into this year?
Well, I think the big thing is they're going to have to win some big games on the road. I mean, playing Boise, Texas, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech all on the road, that makes for a pretty tough schedule. And then get Bedlam at home. That's one of your games that you normally count on winning your home games. Getting Oklahoma at home is not a positive unless it turns into that special type of season. And last year Oklahoma State was one of the most experienced teams in the Big 12, and this year they have the fewest amount of returning starters. And 13 sounds like a lot of returning starters, but in this year, everybody's got 17, 18 starters coming back. So I think the key to Oklahoma State, they're going to have to go on the road and win some games. I think that Texas game and Iowa State game being played back-to-back weeks, October 16th, October 23rd on the road, if they can come out of there with a pair of wins, all of a sudden they are a legitimate Big 12 contender this year.
Yeah, and again, I've had a lot of friends tell me that trip to Boise, don't second guess it for being anything other than just a really almost like trying to win a conference game on the road. And I've never been to Boise, but there's not a lot of teams in the Power Five that go there, and that tells me that it's probably not advisable. But Mike Gundy's done that a couple of times, and other than the trip to Troy, lived to tell about it. So we'll see if the Cowboys live to tell about the trip to Boise here in September.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Boise. They've got two what I call VHT quarterbacks, are very highly touted. Hank Bachmeier was my number 14 rated quarterback out of high school, and Jack Sears originally signed at USC, my number 17 rated quarterback. So they've got two of those. So you rarely in a group of five do you even have one VHT quarterback, let alone two. They've got George Halani is their top running back by far. And last year he got injured in the opener. He didn't play very often. But when he's in the lineup, they're a different team. They've got Shaker, a wide receiver, Riley Smith at tight end. And Andy Avalos is not a newcomer. He's been at Boise. He was the defense coordinator there from 16 to 18. He knows the Boise premise and how they play. He really likes the defense, what he's got coming back this year. In fact, all three units rank in my top units. They're number 10 in special teams. Boise sort of had an atypical year last year, but with 17 returning starters, they're going to be dangerous. I want to see you wearing blue shoes for that one, so your feet blend in on the turf there, Robert.
Well, I'll tell you something, Phil, and you may need to confirm this, but I've heard from some folks in Boise, in locker rooms all summer long, and the weightlifting and the weight rooms, they have that clock. Oklahoma State has one, and it counts down days, hours, minutes, seconds to the opening kickoff. I've heard at Boise that their countdown is not for their opening kickoff. Their countdown is for the Oklahoma State game, and part of the reason, and I think Andy Avalos, I know he was on that staff that came in here several years ago when they played in Stillwater. They got beat by 20. It was a season they thought was a big year for them, and my understanding is that is a sore for them that they haven't gotten over, and so they're kind of actually pinning their ears back to get ready for Oklahoma State. So that could make that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and talking to Coach Avalos, he's the type of guy that would hold a grudge, I think. He's just got that type of personality. Good. So, and that was his last year at Boise, was that game against Oklahoma State when they lost 44-21. So I can picture that. I sort of would get that from talking to him.
Yeah, so good to know. Hey, last thing, tell folks what they need to know. I kind of steered them to the website to order that and get it sent to you. And here's the other thing I love: you're in partnership now with the same people that have our radio network with the Learfield IMG College people.
Yeah, and if you go to my website, which is philsteele.com, and you click on to order the magazine, you actually get right to the IMG Learfield website, and they do a great job. In fact, for years when we printed the magazine, I sent the last page to the press. We'd have to wait about a week and a half till the magazine, the big truck of magazines actually got here, and then we could start shipping them. IMG Learfield, was at the printers. And as soon as the magazines started rolling off, Kirk Phillips was the head honcho doing this. As soon as the magazines started rolling off, they were stuffing them and shipping them out. So it was really a phenomenal operation that IMG Learfield did there. They also got the magazines right to Barnes & Noble. I think printing one cover this year as opposed to printing 12 covers really helped us. And Barnes & Noble actually has them over a good part of the country. Now, they got delivered to the East Coast, and they've been working their way across the country. So don't know if they're quite in Oklahoma yet, but if not, it could be this weekend, or at the latest, it'll be at the Barnes & Nobles this week. But Barnes & Noble, Books A Million are our exclusive dealers this year, and they are getting the magazines out there as quick as possible. It's been a really smooth-running operation, and IMG Learfield's been a big part of that.
Well, and here's the other: if you ever get a chance, if you're crisscrossing the country, and of course the headquarters for Learfield is in Jeff City, Missouri, and you get a chance to tour their facility, they bring us up there every couple of years, and we're part of some meetings and stuff up there. But they have this building, Phil, that is nothing but little carols where the broadcast for every school is run, and they'll have the helmet for that school and some pennants and knickknacks, and it's a room full of different little cubicles that cater to each college, and that's where your broadcast, your radio broadcast, is run through there on game days. And we always send the guy that does our broadcast, we'll send him some shirts and pullovers, and we tell him, hey, we want you dressed like us on game day. So Learfield IMG College, a great organization. I'm glad you're with them.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're with them. So it's worked out pretty well.
Hey, Phil, we appreciate it. Thanks for the time, and again, maybe we'll hook up sometime during the season if we can, but appreciate it.
Yeah, it sounds good. And, Robert, I appreciate what you do for the Phil Steele magazine. You really help us out, especially in the Oklahoma State area, and can't thank you enough for the help that you give us during the spring on Oklahoma State.
Proud to be a part of a winning team, and that's a winning team. So anytime I could be with a winner, I'm good to go.
All right. Well, hey, Robert, thanks for having me on today. Yeah, like I said, can't thank you enough. The magazine hits the Barnes & Noble. Should be by this weekend, so do check it out. And always enjoy our conversations, Robert. Let's do another one before the season starts.
All right, we'll do that. I'll get a hold of Chris, and we'll hook that up. So appreciate it, and good luck with the magazine. I don't know that you need it, but, hey, we always will take a little good luck. Thanks, Phil.
All right, thank you, Robert. Have a good one.
All right, Phil Steele. And again.